Welcome to Unscripted with Daniel. George Douglas, your Director of Development. Would you care to introduce more about yourself?
Sure. Well, thank you. I appreciate the invite and
Thank you for coming.
the opportunity to be here, especially on Thanksgiving Eve. So
yeah, right.
There's much that we all have to be thankful for.
Yes.
And so I'm thankful for the opportunity we have. So my name is George Douglas, and so a couple of different hats that I have to wear or get to wear. One is obviously you're working on sort of the development side, but then also sort of staff to the Valparaiso Redevelopment Commission. Mm-hmm. So kind of serve as the executive director there. So with the commission. So I've been in this role for about 3 years. Prior to that, I served on city council, 2 years at large as council president, and then 2 years representing district number 5, which is sort of on the northwest east side of the city. And then spent several years with Indiana Beverage doing director of development, director of operations, that kind of stuff. And so I spent 15 years there. And going way back in the Wayback Machine, I was actually in the planning department for the city of Valparaiso. That was the late 90s, early 2000s. So I was assistant city planner, then the first economic development planner for the city. So I've been several times, tours of duty, if you will, with the city of Valparaiso in different roles. And I served on the Valparaiso Redevelopment Commission as a commission member, both as a mayoral appointment and then as a city council appointee to the Redevelopment Commission. So it's kind of fun to see things from different hats or different perspectives. And certainly it's the last 3 years in this position.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a lot of experience. So I guess I will introduce this topic that I want to talk about. So prior to the episode, we sort of established like a potential for the RDC to be used as a mechanism for affordable housing. And the logic is sort of like this. The RDC could buy up already cheap land, and for the most part, it uses it to subsidize commercial businesses through tax abatements. I'm sure you're familiar with that process.
Yeah, very much. A lot of what I do outside of the Redevelopment Commission realm, and again, these things sort of work together, if you will, is sort of working with businesses. And I say it's sort of a three-prong area we looked at. One is business attraction. Second is business retention, keeping businesses here. And then third is sort of helping businesses expand. And then outside of that, an economic development or as development director, I'm also working with, a number of projects. Could be commercial, could be, office and stuff like that. So in other nonprofits and other organizations. So kind of think of development as really all-encompassing. Typically what I'm not involved in, and that's more of the planning side, which would be residential development and things like that. I'm typically not involved in that unless there's some other extenuating circumstances or something else that I could get involved in. And again, we work very closely with other city departments and leadership team. And so, work very closely with Bob Thompson as your director of planning.
Okay, I did interview him. So you'd say that maybe the RDC is just typically not used for residential, or is it something that could be, like those abatements could be used for residential, or I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, sure. And again, it's complicated, and it's certainly everything that we do from a redevelopment commission standpoint in our city is all through what I would say enabling statutes through Indiana code and through the state legislature. So those things can change over time. The Redevelopment Commission specifically, I think you were asking about, the affordable housing and other things. And so in the 2025 budget of the Redevelopment Commission, we set aside kind of a new initiative or program, $1 million the commission approved for the budget this year. And it was kind of think of it in three sort of buckets. One bucket would be sort of with land acquisition, and this would be to help nonprofit organizations that are sort of looking at housing, in particular workforce housing type of stuff. Excuse me. So it's sort of $500,000 in that $250,000 would be going towards infrastructure. So again, if you had water line extensions, sewer extensions, those kind of things of public utility or infrastructure. So we had money set aside for that, and then another $250,000 towards initiatives. And I think that the commission was sort of thinking about down payment assistance or other sort of initiatives that would sort of work under this workforce attainable housing umbrella, I guess, if you will. And so this last year, we've really spent a lot of time kind of coming up with the guidelines and then an application. And so the commission, we didn't get that sort of done until, I think that was at our September meeting. That we had both the application and guidelines for the program, how these dollars would get. It's a new program, so we're kind of making this up. We're developing this as we got into the year, and so with a lot of input, we did that. The commission approved it, and then at the last meeting, we had our first application come through. That was from Paradise Community Homes. And they had an application for under the initiatives portion of it for $50,000, and so that was going towards down payment assistance on 5 homes that they have built on Kinsey Street, which is just off Joliet Road and Stokes Road on sort of the west side of the city. So I think we just had that approved, and the commission just signed off on the grant agreement. That was the next piece we had to create once we had an application, was actually the agreement to the mechanism to actually make it work. And so we just got that signed actually last night, yesterday evening. So it's been a lot of work to get to that point. So we're excited really to have the first of hopefully many opportunities and applications looking at this particular issue that will involve the Redevelopment Commission directly.
That's very interesting, and that's for the Paradise Homes, right?
Yeah, this application, yeah.
But so that application could be used in any number of future or present RDC development projects.
Yeah.
Essentially, right?
Yeah, correct. And so on our city's website, there's information there on the guidelines as well as the application. And again, think of there's 3 different opportunities, and you can have an organization that's can hit all 3 of these in one particular project. They can have money for property acquisition, they can have money to help extend public infrastructure, and then they can also use grant dollars towards down payment assistance and so forth. And so it's kind of unique, and I think I'm not aware of other redevelopment commissions, certainly in this area. I'm not saying we're the only one in the state of Indiana, but certainly we are, the commission is focused on this. And then also at the last meeting in earlier this month, the commission approved their 2026 budget. And so, again, we had $1 million for this year, and so far we have 50,000 committed of the 1 million. And so for next year, we actually increased the budget to 1.75 million towards workforce attainable housing. And so we're really excited about that. Hope other organizations will get behind this. It doesn't have to be nonprofits. We kind of want to have qualified nonprofits sort of be the lead on this, but they could also be working with private development. And so it's kind of a partnership that way. So Habitat for Humanity, for example, could certainly come in and say, we've identified lots here, can you help us with that? And again, you can think about, there's a number of different ways that these dollars can be used from a variety of different organizations that are sort of focused on this. One of the key tenets of the program the commission identified, though, this is not for rental, this is really for owner-occupied sort of housing. And again, we sort of define, because there's many definitions for affordable housing or attainable housing or workforce housing, and so the commission kind of looked at housing units that will be below 300,000, and so that's one. And then secondly, for some of the other criteria dealing like down payment assistance and stuff like that, it's really looking at an AMI of 60 to I think 120%. AMI for the area median income is what AMI stands for.
Area median income.
Yeah, so that will be adjusted, annually, depending, however often that number comes out, as long as the program hits that.
Okay, I really like the sound of this workforce development grant. Can you just break down clearly those three portions of those grants? Because I know you mentioned the three portions. What are those three portions of the workforce housing?
So yeah, the three buckets that makes up and again, it's kind of think of it, we have, now for 2026, 1.75 million, and the commission kind of looked at, okay, it could be for property acquisition, so buying land, so it has to be in the city, it has to then get zoned appropriately, and go through subdivision process and some of the planning and that kind of stuff. The other would be sort of public infrastructure, so it could be road improvements. So we really were very intentional about, especially on infill projects. And so if you've got a project that's, let's just say, is on land that's in city now, and it's maybe been passed up for development because there's a lot of challenges with it. You need to bring a water line to it or sewer line. The road needs to be upgraded and repaved, or there's no sidewalks. And so we set aside dollars then that could be used for those things, because all of those costs of the developer or whoever's taking the project is added on to the cost of the units. And so if we can look at those things that are sort of a public benefit in serving not just this development but other development, these dollars would be great to help reduce and offset the end product cost. And so we put money in there. Then the last piece was that the sort of grant initiatives was sort of the down payment assistance and sort of thing. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And I shouldn't, I'm not, this is not a space that I'm directly involved in every day. And so a lot of organizations, but a lot of the feedback we heard again is one of the challenges is just, for people that want to find and be able to move into a home is the down payment. It's sort of having that equity available to be able to do that. And so with Paradise Homes, they're working very closely with a lot of banks, and so that's been, they've really been able to access different programs and really understand it. And so we were excited to have their application come through. And again, there's a limit of 10,000 per household or per unit that can go for the grant initiatives portion of it, not the overall.
Right. Okay. Well, that's really awesome. Thank you for breaking that down for me. And just to circle back to in the typical usage of the RDC, it is more common at this point, as far as my understanding, is to use tax abatements for commercial businesses as opposed to residential homes. Is this something that the RDC can do, or is it not really within their scope to do?
Yeah, so a great question. And let me just clarify when you talk about tax abatement. So really, tax abatement is not something that runs through the Redevelopment Commission. By state statute, the Redevelopment Commission cannot grant a tax abatement. So that's only granted by the City Council. And so any abatement goes through the City Council, and it is not for residential property. It is typically for just commercial or industrial type of property. And so I think most recently the Redevelopment Commission in October did a tax abatement for excuse me, Sunset Technologies, which is a company here in town that was expanding, and so out in Eastport. So, for example, so that's an abatement. And then others been, last year related to, new businesses or expansion of businesses or, industrial type of property type of stuff that's going in. Residential, again, not an abatement there. From a TIF standpoint, which is tax increment financing, and so if a TIF district is established, and so we've had a couple, certainly around the city for, going back to the late 90s, honestly, is when our first Redevelopment Commission and TIF district was established. And so over the years, there's been a number of districts and consolidation of districts. And so in those cases, you can have a TIF district around commercial development, including multifamily apartments and stuff like that. We've had some, like an economic development district created around, I think, St. Paul's Square, which is condo units. We had a residential TIF that was done around Calkins Hill, which are the townhomes at the former White House restaurant is how some people remember the site, but that's just off of Jefferson and Chicago Street in Morgan, for example. And so they're, again, a little bit different. So the state does allow residential TIFs, again, primarily for single family sort of homes, townhomes, that kind of stuff. And so that was one that was established in the late 2020s. 2019, I think that was established. And so that was done, and those are luxury condos that were done there.
For some reason, I can't even remember what the initials of TIF stand for. I'm sure most people...
Tax increment financing.
Tax increment financing, which means that for a long period of time, they will not be taxed directly by the city, but instead is reinvested in some way. But where's the money going?
Yeah.
How does that work exactly?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And again, it's not complicated, and sometimes it's easier to show visually, but sort of think of it as the Redevelopment Commission, and again, they can't unilaterally decide to establish a TIF district or an allocation area, a tax allocation area. So that requires, it starts with the Redevelopment Commission, goes to the Plan Commission, there's public hearings, onto the City Council, back then to the Redevelopment Commission. So there's multiple steps in the process, very public, with public hearings and so forth to establish it. And once you establish a allocation area or a TIF district, it sort of establishes a base, a property tax base of what the assessed valuation is on that property. Now, ideally, you're doing it on property that's about to be redeveloped, right? Because you don't want to, it wouldn't do any good to capture or create an allocation area after the development, after it's already been assessed, because you're only capturing the increment, the increase after you establish it. So, so creating the TIF district just establishes a base. And then any future development, once that development happens, the county comes in, the assessor comes in, assesses the property, and says, okay, now it's gone from a base of, let's make the numbers simple, and say $1,000 is the assessed valuation, and now the assessed valuation is $1 million. So that $999,000 is captured and collected. Now it's just the assessed valuation, then whatever the tax rate is for the city or in township at that point is what's captured, and it is remitted to the Valparaiso Redevelopment Commission. So then that is now in the hands of the Redevelopment Commission then to spend those dollars in there. It may not even go directly to that project. It could go towards the workforce housing dollars that we just talked about. And I can go through some of the projects that we use allocation dollars towards. Very few really directly go to what I would say the development itself.
I see.
In so a lot of cases, there's a number of different things that it goes to that are of more public benefit and more directed elsewhere, such as the workforce housing we just talked about. So that's an example of then. So the Redevelopment Commission captures that, and then that's what we then have to establish our budget on is those dollars that are coming in, and so yeah, those are sort of what we use then for a variety of different projects and initiatives. And an example would be we do school challenge grants out of our TIF dollars. So those go to both East Porter County and in Valparaiso community schools. Sidewalks and pathways can be used out of TIF dollars. Sometimes we use it, there's been paving that we do, a lot of industrial sort of development and infrastructure improvement. The workforce housing, workforce and attainable housing is very much an economic development related initiative. And so dollars could go towards that. More specifically, some of our grants that we receive and federal and state grants that run through the Northern Indiana Regional Plan Commission or NERPC like it is an 80% federal grant or state grant, and then we have to provide the local match. We use those TIF dollars as the local match.
I see.
So when you think about like some of the public infrastructure roundabouts at Silhavy Road and LaPorte Avenue, for example, we've got one coming up on Campbell Street and Lincoln Way,
right,
for example. And so those dollars that are captured through the TIF, so we use development to help pay for some of the infrastructure that needs to be done. And so, because again, the city is very limited on what resources they have available. And so this is one way to have development sort of pay for the infrastructure related to not only that development, but also other development.
I see. I've had a few interviews. There's one where one of my interviewees was critical of the way that the RDC collects funds, and like, well, it could go more quickly. The taxes from this development more quickly could go to our community, to our schools, to our city tax base, and we haven't seen the benefit of what this RDC is actually doing in his mind. And I want you to speak to that. How do we measure the effectiveness of the RDC to serve our community needs as opposed to what the city would be able to do with those potential tax dollars?
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty loaded question, and there's a lot to probably unpack there.
Okay.
And so most people, I think it can be challenging to understand how city governments are funded and the resources that come in. Most of 70% of city funding is coming from property taxes, for example. In the state, you've got, for cities, typically two different you've got a levy limit and you've got a rate limit that impacts your tax rates, and it impacts what a city or school district may be able to capture. And so the argument is, well, the Redevelopment Commission establishes these TIF districts. They're capturing those resources that would otherwise go to a city or to a school. In reality, those entities aren't necessarily losing those dollars because it's not established by the assessed valuation. The city establishes, here's how much we need to raise to be able to establish the services that we have. And so therefore the rate is then established based on the dollars that are needed. So just because we're capturing assessed valuation doesn't mean that there is a shortfall that the city is losing out on. It may mean the property tax rate is higher as a result because we need to have a higher rate to be able to capture the dollars that are needed. I don't know if that makes sense. And so the funds that would be impacted are sort of cumulative funds, which means that the maximum amount of the levy is established, saying this is the tax rate, you can't go above this. And so if we're capturing assessed valuation, then that means there is a shortfall of dollars because your tax rate can't be adjusted. And so if you look at, in the Redevelopment Commission, by state statute, we have to report every year what the impact is of the Redevelopment Commission on all of the taxing units. And so we have that. It is on our website. It has going all the way back, I think, for at least the last 10 years. So we report that. We just recently had a meeting with the schools just to kind of go through and to understand those impacts that they have. For Valparaiso Community Schools, because they passed a referendum, and so therefore a allocation area has no impact on the referendum side of it because that is treated separately. So referendum dollars are not captured by the Redevelopment Commission. Those still flow back to the schools. Oh. So it's really kind of understanding really the two different, the rate limit and the levy limit of the tax rate and what that impact is. And then so when you do that, you realize that they're not losing dollars. And so it's not like, wow, if all of the assessed valuation that's being captured by a Redevelopment Commission went away, we'd be getting $1 million new dollars. That's not, you're getting the same dollars. What would be different is your tax rate would be lower, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And so, so that's kind of, so I think the impact, and I did bring the report for 2024, which is the most recent report. And I want to say for Valparaiso Center Town, or Valparaiso, Washington Township, I want to say it's like 12 cents. So their rate is increased by roughly 12 cents on 100 per $100. That is the impact to them. And so I try to ask people, if you think about Valparaiso, most people don't understand what the Redevelopment Commission is using those dollars towards. And so if you understand that and you drive around and you look at developments that are happening, I think most people, without a doubt, would say this is a great community. We've got great things going on. It's attractive. We continue to find people that want to move here and live here and do business here and come visit here. And we don't necessarily put a stamp on it and say, well, this roundabout only happened because of a redevelopment commission. And so it's almost try to imagine if it wasn't there, what would it look like?
Yeah.
And when you start thinking about, okay, it's costing you 12 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, is that, are you getting value for that? And I think people would argue that absolutely you are. And in some cases, I think there's been some people that really just want to understand, or quantify what is the impact of a redevelopment commission or a TIF district. And I'm not sure it's so easy to just look at it and say, from a qualitative standpoint or from a quantitative standpoint, what is the empirical data to say this is the impact? We can do it, certainly we have to in an annual report, look at it that way, but take Central Park as a prime example. Central Park happened because of a redevelopment commission. They were a very key part of that. What does downtown look like? What does Valparaiso look like without a Central Park?
It's a great question.
It is a great question, I think. And I think when people think about it that way and go to the university and say, God, what if you're downtown? What if you didn't have a Central Park? What if you didn't have some of the things here? How does that impact families that are looking, or freshmen that are looking to come here, or universities looking to attract faculty to a community? Is this an attractive community that people want to be in? And I think the answer is yes. You see that with our population, and again, it's a very steady growth. And there's, I think, so some of those challenges that are there, I don't think it's so easy to say, well, if the Redevelopment Commission just went away, we'd have all this newfound money. That is not true. Secondly, your tax rate may be lower, but I would argue you go back in, your tax rate is going down every single year because of the overall assessed valuation. In other words, the activity of not just the Redevelopment Commission, but just all the things that make Valparaiso a great place to live, a great place to, great quality of life. And so with that becomes new investment and new dollars coming into the community, whether it's in a TIF district or not. Those dollars, those investments, that increase in assessed valuation lowers the tax rate. And so that is more than offsetting what is being captured by the Redevelopment Commission. And I think look at what the Redevelopment Commission is doing with those dollars. I think we're being a very good steward. And again, it's very public, and there's city council members that are appointed. We have to present an annual report to the city council. And so if you think about it, I think if the Redevelopment Commission went away, this is a much different community. And I don't think the trade-offs are as black and white as people want to say we'd be better off without it, because they have squandered money and they've given it to development. Very little is actually going to development. In those Grand Garner Hotel and Journeyman, how are those impacting the neighborhood around them and attracting new development that's coming in that, again, may or may not be in a Redevelopment Commission TIF district?
I see. You mentioned something like the the tax rate is actually going down because of it being offset by, I want to unpack
assessed valuation. So yes, your tax rates in effect is really based on the assessed valuation. So if you look at the growth of assessed valuation, and I would encourage people to not just look at Valparaiso's growth in assessed valuation, look at the county, look at all the surrounding area. So as our assessed valuation goes up, which means the pie is bigger, right? We have more assessed valuations, which means your tax rate goes lower because we have more dollars to
and when we're saying assessed value, are we talking about land, property?
Real property. It could be real so you have land, you have improvements, right? So you've got a vacant land is got at a certain assessed valuation. Let's take a house, for example. Then the improvements have a certain assessed valuation.
Right.
And then if there's a business and there's business personal property, equipment, then that's assessed. So all of those go into the bucket.
I guess it is a balancing act, though, if we're driving up assessed value to a certain extent, it does keep some people from accessing that land. And the sort of workforce housing grant system is almost like a response to that growth.
Sure.
Where it has to be created in order to decrease the barrier to actually get that property, which is a good thing to have. But I can just see that it's sort of a balancing act of we're creating value, but there's pros and cons to that value. And obviously, like you're saying, we have great improvements that are going on downtown, and these are great things, but
sidewalks and all the other things that you have. Look at the great parks that we have, the great schools that we have. We have a safe community. And so those investments so the Redevelopment Commission, for example, spends money buying police replacement vehicles, for example. And that's one of those things, like, do people realize that and understand what that looks like? And if the commission wasn't doing that, again, it's not like the city has new dollars coming in. It's the same dollars. Right? So what would they have to shuffle to reprioritize to be able to do that? And so those things, add up. And then we do neighborhood grants, for example, and Maggie Clifton is done a wonderful job of doing improvements in neighborhood. Those are funded through the Redevelopment Commission. Art Walk and some of the stuff that is being done there is funded through the Redevelopment Commission. And how do you put a price tag on that? And I think it's just adding all of those things up. And again, I would argue, you look at our annual report and say, if all of the assessed valuation went away, here's what the impact would be on your tax rate. Again, not necessarily new dollars coming in unless it's a cumulative fund, and even that, I mean, it's very minuscule, and so it's really looking at what we do. And the state does have, again, they have a sunset, so we're going to start seeing allocation areas sunset starting in 2029, and so certain assessed valuation gets released and comes off the tax roll. And so I think overall, if you look at what we've done on our community, and what we've done with our Redevelopment Commission, and how those dollars are being used, I think they're being reinvested back into the community, and to a large extent to the benefit of everybody in the community and the overall community. And if you were to take those away, I would argue then point to how those would have happened without it, without some sort of sacrifice of city services, or not having the same quality of services that we have, because those funds would have had to been used on something else. And if you do that, then again, think about what impact that would have had on other investment or interest in people moving here or developing here. And so it sort of becomes almost not a self-fulfilling, I guess, prophecy or whatever else. So if you take one away, it's going to have an impact on, 10 other things. And so I think that's kind of important to sort of frame up and think about. And I think, the challenge, I think, with property values and stuff like that's not unique to Valparaiso. It's not unique to Porter County, Northwest Indiana. This has been going on really around the country. And so the challenges, I think, when it comes to housing affordability is national problem, if not global problem. And there's no one issue, no one way to solve it. And nobody is. I think everyone is trying different things to do that. And I think you look at what Valparaiso has done compared to any other community in Northwest Indiana and beyond. And I would say that we are addressing and tackling with some of the issues that are there that prevent people from being able to afford or to attain housing, and there's a lot of effort that's going in that, and not just at the city level, but the quality of the nonprofits and the faith-based organizations here that are working to do this, and it's not like Valpo can solve it, and what happens in another neighboring community, it directly impacts Valparaiso and vice versa. So right. I think of like the V line, the Chicago Dash, and some of the things that we have for a community of our size, and for what your tax rate is and the services that you receive, and you add all that stuff up, and I think Valpo becomes a very, I say a really great value for what you get, and I think that's some of the stuff that we see, going on that makes this again an attractive place to be.
100%. Just so that people can follow up on that data, what's the name of the website?
Yeah, so that's on the City of Valparaiso website. Okay. I think that's just ci.valparaiso.us. Okay. And then there should be a link off the Redevelopment Commission page. Okay.
So if I type in RDC Annual Report Valparaiso, it'll be there. Okay.
And certainly people can reach out to me if they can't, and we can send a link and make sure they get it, but it is on our website.
Okay, this is not something that's on the question list, but it's something that you talked about. I guess I brought up a little bit too. Schools, when we are expanding and growing, I guess this is, I have known nothing about, but when we are expanding, eventually you do have to think about adding new schools and... Oh, yeah. And that's part of the thing of the question of affordable housing. Once you have a lot of multifamily or you have a lot of apartments, you're bringing in a lot of students, regardless of what you think of people who live in affordable housing. There's a lot of stigmas and whatever. But just by number of pupils basis, there's a problem presented where now the number of students per teacher is going up. And do you guys have, I don't know, any plan for that? Is there a magic ratio for that sort of thing?
Yeah, a question that probably is best served directed at the superintendent and the schools. I mean, they're the ones that are, and again, I think they work closely with the city in terms of growth areas, annexation, future annexations, residential developments, that kind of stuff. There's, excuse me, keep a close eye on that. And again, I can speak directly to that being the case for both the Valparaiso Community School Corporation as well as East Porter County School Corporation. And I should point out to your listeners, I mean, the Redevelopment Commission, this is by state statute, there is a representative that is on the Redevelopment Commission that has to be a representative of the schools.
Makes sense.
And so it just is because we touch two different school districts, East Porter County as well as Valparaiso Community Schools. And so we just have a representative that is on there. And so that is a non-voting advisory, but they participate in all the discussions. They participate in executive. And so they're very much aware of what the commission is doing and understanding, impacts and benefits to the school district in that particular case. And so I think, your question about, schools and when to add a new school, I think the schools are sort of faced. Again, I am not I'm an outsider, that has been here and certainly have been involved and worked with schools over the past. But I mean, I can tell you that enrollment is dropping for both Valparaiso and East Porter County schools. And so, and this is not just a trend that's here in Valparaiso or in Northwest Indiana. I think this is a trend really around the country in a lot of cases. I mean, people are waiting longer to have families. People are having less kids. And so all those things are impacting, what our future enrollment looks like. I think, for the last several years of the high school, and again, I'll just speak directly to Valpo. Valpo Community Schools has had a graduating class that is larger than the incoming class. And so you can kind of see what's going to happen, and certainly you see that in higher education. There's just less kids that are going on to post-secondary schools and so forth. And so you see that enrollment impacting especially institutions around the country, especially private institutions. And so, again, this is something that's going on around the country that's a very big concern for communities. And so growth and annexation and housing and all those things are really important. Apartments and what that looks like for the number of kids that are coming in and what that impact is going to be to a schools is certainly something that they stay very close to. But how a school district chooses to address that, either by increasing class size or doing other things, that's just as a nature, I think, of how the state is funding public education in particular, and the nature of voucher programs and kids and families having the ability to choose, and the dollars follow the kids. Schools are no longer primary funding is now done through the state and not off property taxes. And so that's a change that's really impacted public education. And so, I would say there's just a lot of, I guess, concern in how this looks moving forward and what the impacts will be, not only to individual school districts, but I think in general.
It's such a big issue. We are not the most qualified people to talk about it, but I can't help but talking about it now because it is important. It's such a confluence of a lot. The voucher program has made it easier for people to go to private schools, but it also is not as tax efficient as public schools. So it really eventually will harm the people who can't afford to go to private school. In other words, lower income people. Like if we go down the line and just sort of play this out and look at this trend 10 years down the road, now the enrollment maybe is 50% of what it once was. And now more and more public schools are shutting down. Are there going to be enough private institutions to educate our youth? And that's what I don't want to happen.
Yeah, and these are certainly big questions, and I think you're right. I mean, this is certainly out of my area of expertise and certainly have opinions about, but for sake of, I guess, our conversation, yeah, it's a topic that is I think at a lot of people's minds in terms of where this is all going to go and how do we solve this. And it is certainly very complex, and there's a lot of what I would, as we talked about, just in terms of how people are, families and how they're approaching, having kids and number of kids and when they decide to get married. And so all those things have got to...
It's that, and it's homeschooling, and it's private school, and it's just all these... but to tie that back in, we started the question on more affordable housing impacting whether we should build another school or not. And it sounds like, at this point, we probably should build more affordable housing so that we can increase the tax base so that we can fund those schools. But thing would play out.
Yeah, from my experience has been, I mean, again, as we talked about in terms of affordability, and there's a lot of things that are driving that are, again, way outside of anything within our direct control here in terms of in the city of Valparaiso or in Porter County or Northwest Indiana. And there's been housing studies and kind of looking at different things that we're trying to do to provide the best level of service for all people at all income levels. And again, I look at the V line and look at some of the things that we have here. We're trying to do infill projects that are, creating more walkable neighborhoods or close to economic centers, so people don't have to always get in a car. And we've got, done a lot with pathways and sidewalks and those kind of things, and in looking at those, infill projects to increase density in particular, because again, we're not extending utilities, and so if you've already got the infrastructure there, the most economical way, it may not be the cheapest to develop, but from a utility or from an infrastructure standpoint, it's better to do it where you've already got a road, you've already got water and sewer and so forth there, versus annexing land that's 2 miles out and trying to extend utilities to it. And now anybody living there, whether it's affordable housing or whatever, is got to get in a car and go forth. And then the city has got to extend services of trash and recycling pickup and police and fire and so forth. Further away, it's more expensive to serve. And so I like to, also, sort of frame up, most residential development does not pay for the services they consume. And people sometimes are surprised by that, but if you look at it from an economic standpoint, like, yeah, absolutely, you need residential development, you need people, that's right. There's a lot of different components of a community, and we want to certainly be attractive at all levels in the community. And so, but residential development, and I say that because it's really important to understand that, like, commercial and industrial diversifies our tax base. Typically, the circuit breaker of 2 to 3% is different than the circuit breaker for residential property, which is at 1% of assessed valuation is the most your.
When you say circuit breaker, what does that mean?
So circuit breaker, so the state, when they did property tax reforms, and I don't remember the year on that, like 2015, someplace in there, where they established a circuit breaker saying, as a property owner for residential, let's say, whatever your assessed valuation of the property is, it is capped at 1% of that assessed valuation, right? So that means your taxes can't be any higher than 1% of your assessed valuation. Okay. So, and again, there's all kinds of reports that indicate what that impact is to the city in terms of those are then tax dollars that are lost because of the circuit breaker. And so depending on what the assessed valuation is, that's how that is impacting. Then commercial property is typically 2%, and I think agriculture is 2%, and then 3% for industrial, that kind of stuff. And so those things have a tremendous impact and something that a community thinks about. And so my point was, again, diversifying your tax base is good. Having new investment come in is good, because what that means is that means there's new dollars coming in. That means there's more assessed valuation to spread what is the, your tax rate needs to be, because this is the amount of dollars we need to raise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
So you want that. If your community is not attracting new investment, is not attracting new residents coming in, that means there's less of a pie that now would be split up. So your tax rate's going to have to go up. So the more increase in the assessed valuation you have coming into your community, the lower your tax rate. And you see that even with a redevelopment commission and the allocation areas that we have. And so it's just, I mean, that's an easy way to kind of picture that.
Interesting.
And again, I like to think of it as a household. If your income is staying stagnant, right, but in the meantime, all of your other expenses have gone up, right? Your utilities are going up, your property taxes, your assessed valuation is going up, groceries and fuel and so forth, cost of living, everything is going up. And so if you're not meeting that inflation level, then you're falling behind.
Right.
From just a simple standpoint, I think it's kind of the same with tax rates. So if you don't have new dollars coming in, if you're not increasing the assessed valuation in your community, that means then all of us are going to have to pay more to maintain the same dollars that we need to operate the city.
Makes sense. So I kind of have an answer on this, and we've been sort of all over the place, but there's been a lot of interesting things that have come up throughout this. But I guess I'll ask this question. How
You seem reluctant to ask the question.
Yeah, because I feel like we maybe half answered it. I kind of maybe half understand. I'll just go ahead and ask it. Is a 20 or 30-year TIF really necessary for speedy development, or would it be better to have a shorter length TIF so that the city can benefit sooner from the property taxes? Well, I guess, the city does benefit on either side of the equation, I guess is part of the answer, but I'll let you sort of fill in the gaps of...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I think it really just depends on what the allocation area is doing. If it's, for example, we have some allocation areas that are sort of single parcel because there's an economic development revenue bond tied to it. So the Grand Gardner Hotel, that the Urschel Corporation is the old Boys and Girls Club, creating that. So there's a separate allocation area just around that property. And so based on the amount of economic development revenue bonds proceeds they need to make that project happen or to help finance the project, that's going to an allocation area of 25 years to be able to get to that overall incentive, I guess, if you will. So shortening it is only going to do one of two things. It either means you need to give them, you need to incent the project on the front end higher, and so because you've shortened the length and time at which to sort of pay back any sort of bonds or anything like that would be issued on the project. And so to me, you almost have to look at each individual project and just see what it is that you're trying to do here, what is being captured, how much of that is going towards the development, what else is being captured, then what are those dollars being used for, school challenge grants and so on and so forth. And you have to kind of look at it that way. I think that's the most holistic way to sort of look at it. As I said before, I mean, we're starting to approach that window when they changed and had a sunset for allocation areas, and we're starting to come up on that. So you'll start to see that happen over the next 10 years. Quite a few parcels will roll off, return back to the tax roll. Again, it's not going to be necessarily new dollars coming in unless it's a cumulative fund. That those are impacted for sure, but there's not. Again, the impact is pretty small even by today's standards on the tax rate. But as those come in, that certainly is it helps spread because you've increased the assessed valuation then in which those districts are able to use to help lower the tax rate.
Okay, right. So when these new projects from the RDC come off of the TIF, then that will lower the tax rates. That's the idea?
Yeah, because you've released the assessed valuation.
Now it's larger.
So even though assessed value, even though tax rates continue to go down, they now would even be more. So I think it's 12 cents is sort of what is the example I used. And again, I think that was East Porter County or Washington Township, Valpo is a 12-cent tax rate impact.
That's good.
So the rate continues to go down, but now it even dropped another 12 cents per $100 of assessed valuation in 2024 numbers.
Let me see what things I haven't answered here.
Or you haven't asked, I haven't answered.
I haven't asked. I guess these are sort of a similar question.
And I do have a meeting in a little, so yeah.
Okay, so let's do this quick. This is basically just two questions left.
Okay.
So with this Eastside development, let's sort of dispel the misconceptions about what's going on with it. Nothing's set in stone, right? That's essentially...
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what's known as the Eastside Master Plan 2.0. Originally, when there was a sports park that was envisioned on roughly 250 acres, sort of on the east side of the property, so as the park department was going through that, then on the west side of that and the east side of 49 next to Powers Health or St. Mary's there is some privately owned land as well as land owned by them, St. Mary's that is, or Powers Health. We engaged Browning Day to kind of look at, hey, if we've got this sports recreation campus happening on one side, what is the rest of this land? What should it be? It's zone campus. It's privately owned. How are the roads? How are pathways? How do we make these two projects? How do we blend them together? What makes sense? And so they were kind of working on a master plan again as a guide, not something that says this is what you shall do. It's more to help decision makers, the property owners, and others to think about another development that may be coming in as they sell off parcels to think about these things. And so that's what they were working on. And then when the sports in campus recreation project was canceled, if you will, then the Redevelopment Commission was sitting with this 250 acres. What do we do with it?
Right.
We stopped the process at that time because this went away, and so there's nothing to meld together the two. And then so now it's like, okay, well, there was value to doing the process that we were going through, and so we've re-engaged Browning Day to kind of conceptualize. Again, the 250 acres the city / Redevelopment Commission owns, as well as the privately owned property, again, of St. Mary's and Patco, which is the other landowner out there. Again, think about Memorial Parkway is going to be extended all the way down to 400. So we're working on those plans. And so what is this? What should happen here?
Right.
And again, it's not. We're not rezoning anything. We're not selling anything at this point. It's just sort of bring the stakeholders together, gather community input. What makes sense here? Think of this as sort of a 10 or 20 year plan that will be used as a guide, again, for the property owners, for the community, for elected officials, for a redevelopment commission to think about. So when opportunities come up, or if we prioritize, hey, we want to see A out here, how do we do that? Right. And now you've got sort of a plan to kind of use. And so that's the way it was originally envisioned, and I think that hasn't really changed any. And again, it will be up to others decide, I guess, if you will, like the city is going through an update to our comprehensive plan. Right. And so, is this guide or this vision for the areas developed? It will be presented to the Plan Commission to get their input. It'll be presented to the Redevelopment Commission to get the Commission's full input, since they do control at least 250 acres there. And at that point, I think, a plan is adopted. Again, nothing happens on it. We have it, and we can use it and give it out as need be. And if the city decides, and I say the city, it would be up to the Plan Commission, certainly your planning director of the city and Plan Commission and elected officials to incorporate that or to adopt it as a comprehensive plan. But it's not like if somebody came in and said, well, I want to do this out here on privately owned property. It's really up to them. But if they want to rezone it, then we can, say, hey, well, we got this plan here. The community's weighed in on, the stakeholders have weighed in on, and we really want to see this. Yeah. Can you do that? And they say, well, we're not interested in that. Right. Say, okay, well, good luck. Again, they still have to go through a plan commission and still go through, if there's a rezone, for example. And so so that's how the plan would then be used. I see. To say, hey, we like this, or you know what, this was a dumb thing. And then, again, you can have a total change in 2 years of an administration, of a city council, and everybody else, and they may say that's great, but we don't like it. Right. So I mean, that's just with any plan. I mean, that's kind of the you're at the but that's the intent behind why we started down this road.
And it all makes sense. And I guess part of the controversy is the history of that
Sure.
land. And one might bring up the debacle with the data center and obviously originally the sports complex. People say that, the city was saying that there was not going to be a data center, and then there was a plan for a data center. And I don't know if you know anything about like the order of events that happened that caused that tension in the community. I'm not sure. Do you know anything about the?
Sure.
Okay.
I absolutely do.
So, is it correct that?
I guess I mean, first of all, I mean, we can go back in examine that.
Yes.
If that's the sort of the question, and I like to tell people, I mean, the commission on the property, there was no longer going to be a park there on the property, at least all of the property. I mean, the sports and recreation campus was done, and I think that's the initial start of. Hold on a second.
Now what?
People didn't know it was canceled, I think, is probably the first thing. They just didn't see anything happening there, and so again, that was not a redevelopment commission project. That's a park-led project. Certainly, the redevelopment commission was involved with some funding and obviously, acquiring the property and those kind of things. But so I think that was the first step. Is just that people were unaware that the project was canceled and it was no longer going to be a sports and recreation campus. Secondly, after that, certainly we had a number of different inquiries into the property from, hey, would you sell it to us? We want to do residential development. Would you sell it to us? We want to do, a grocery store, a fuel station, hotels, you name it. Those came in. It's like, look, we don't know what we want to do. Certainly there's been a lot of discussion about data centers and coming to the area, and certainly we're aware of all that. And so the involvement, quite honestly, was not necessarily going to be a data center. Think of it from a developer standpoint, like, yes, their end goal was maybe to be able to do a data center, but first and foremost is they don't even know if one could go there. And so the real question was really about process of what a developer or a project has to follow, some sort of process to be able to come out at the end of the day to say, yes, this is doable for what I want it to be. And so there was a million ways, off ramps, or ways this could have never materialized into a data center project. And so the involvement of the commission was really to look at some sort of option agreement that would be exclusive to somebody to go in and say, you have to go out and do your due diligence. In the meantime, the city will do its due diligence to see, first of all, whether or not you can even do what you say you want to do, and secondly, whether or not we even can serve the project you say you want to do. And so I think that's where it then got into the public realm before there was an opportunity for either party, the city / redevelopment commission or the developer, to even go through and say, yeah, you know what? We do have power from NIPSCO. The soils do work for this. We can get whatever utilities we need, and we understand what the zoning process needs to be. We think we can do this here, and now we want to move forward and buy the land. And we just never got there because the public then was like, oh my God, you're doing a data center. And it's like, well, no, maybe, but we don't even know if we are. And so it's kind of it's difficult because I think the concern was, first of all, this thing could have died before it ever became a data center.
Right.
And so what comes first? Do you notify everybody and say, hey, they're thinking about doing this? And again, we had non-disclosure agreements and things like that we can't do. And so it's sort of like, it's a very public process. Mm-hmm. And I get it. I mean, if you're not if you're not, and maybe, certainly we could have done a better job of educating on what the process needs to be and sharing that. And it's really no different. Take data center out of the equation and say, we want to put a hotel there. We want to put a gas station there. We don't typically go out. The process doesn't say, hey, neighbors or community, we're going to put a gas station here. And before someone even does their due diligence to say, oh, I can't do it here. Like, well, then now we've just angered everybody and got them all excited saying there's going to be a gas station here. Then the developer comes in and says, well, you know what? The soils are terrible. I can't do it here. I don't have the road access. I don't have the water. I don't have the sewer. I don't have NIPSCO. There's a million reasons. And so therefore we're moving on to a different site.
Right.
I mean, that happens all the time in what I do. I shouldn't say all the time, but a lot of times, you take any vacant parcel that's been around for a while, and I can get 2 inquiries a week on it saying, I'm thinking about doing this here. It's like, we don't immediately go out and say, hey, this may happen here, because sometimes people look at it and I never hear from them again.
Right.
Now, the challenge with a data center is again, all the stuff you see going on. I mean, there's just a lot of interest here in the community, not just Valpo, I'm talking about in general, Northwest Indiana, the state of Indiana. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay. And as I don't want to get into the merits of a data center, I'm agnostic when it comes to that. I mean, the project is the project, and if it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, I don't care. We're not going to support it. And so we were never really there yet. We just didn't know enough information yet. And that's why I said we haven't had a chance to even vet it. We didn't know what the impacts were going to be to our utilities, didn't know the impact of taxes and so forth. And so there's a lot of things that we never had the opportunity to even explore to say this is good or bad. And that's okay. It's unfortunate, because I think, projects need to stand on their own merits. There needs to be a process, and I don't think it would have changed the outcome. I think the things you saw going on with other communities, I think there's people that are just vehemently opposed and don't want to hear the facts or the merits of a project that they've already determined not here. And I think that's, I think that's not fair to the entire community. I think, for elected officials that have to make those decisions, I think we need to, wait and let's get all the information. Let's figure out if there is a project, then let's discuss the merits of the project. So we have to do our homework, they have to do theirs. And I think real quick too, why sort of the exclusivity on the option agreement? Well, I mean, that's not, again, take data center out of it. Any developer coming in, I'll take a residential development. If a residential developer was coming in and wanted to look at property, they're not going to go in and do the due diligence knowing the full time that we could also turn around and do something else with the property, because doing that due diligence is very expensive, especially with a data center. And so if you can imagine that, we either have to do it in such a way that if they incurred $500,000 of expenses, we would have had to reimburse them for that. And I think that would have been, the community would have been more upset if we had arranged that and said, yeah, go ahead and do all of your due diligence and then send us a bill if you decide, or if the community decides we don't want the project. I think that would have been just as egregious maybe for some people if that's the approach we take. And again, I remind people, you wouldn't sell your house, you wouldn't build a house and say, you know what, I'm going to buy this piece of land and I'm going to design my house and I'm going to put it on there if you didn't have the exclusive ability to actually buy the lot. In other words, the owner could sell it to somebody else. Like, hold on a second, I just paid all this money to develop the plans and you just turn around and sold it because someone gave you $100 more per acre. And so that's, I guess, kind of the yin and yang and kind of again, take data center out of it. That's just kind of development. I mean, you have to be able to, especially on large projects. And it's kind of interesting. You see, and again, I'll get off the data center again. I will, again, for your listeners, I'm, agnostic. We just never got down to the point of really understanding the benefits as well as the what I would say the drawbacks of the project. Yeah. And so, and again, I'm not suggesting that there are no drawbacks. I'm certainly suggesting that we just haven't had the opportunity to really dive into it. And yet you see, $12 billion projects going on. I mean, these are B with a billion.
Right.
And again, I'm not here saying that alone in itself means the project is worthy of doing. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there's things that you need to fully, I think, understand the project, the drawbacks, the benefits of it, and then decide, is this good or not? And again, I think we just never got there. That's other people had those decisions to make, and it was very clear that it was not attainable at this location. Right. It doesn't mean it's not elsewhere in the city, but it certainly wasn't there.
In other words, the timeline that common understanding has is not quite correct as far as their understanding of the timeline. There are no plans for a data center, but then there was a plan for it. The conception of what a plan is in most people's minds is not correct, because they're just essentially, they have to look at the land. Oh, turns out it's a swamp. I can't build there. Or those many factors. But, and maybe you guys would have said, you know what, we've been looking online and maybe it affects our water supply. We're not sure that we want to do this. Public outcry, whatever.
Correct.
You've answered the question very well and very thoroughly. So let's move to the next thing, and this will be the last one. For any given RDC project, is there a set of goals that guides how the city allocates the land? I don't know if you've ever looked at the agenda for Better Community by Project Neighbors. It has a lot of great guidelines. I'm not sure, it could be used for RDC development.
Yeah, so I mean, the Redevelopment Commission, again, most of the property is not owned by Redevelopment Commission. The Redevelopment Commission, typically we're buying property, it's usually for a specific project. We don't buy and hold property typically.
Right.
That's rare that happens, or we're making way for, again, a public project. We'll buy a property because there's going to be a new intersection improvement or something like that. And so it's part of a larger local match or something like that, the commission would be involved. And then after that, the commissions, then again, yes, we have, and I shouldn't say we as just the commission. I mean, the city has, before there's any allocation area, there has to be an economic development plan that's established first. And so that plan will outline the goals of any future sort of allocation area that will be on that in that area. And so that will outline, again, promoting diversification of your tax base, growing jobs, growing wages, and so forth, and so on. And so it's and certainly there's that's available on the city's website as well. And so that has to be done even before there's a tax abatement, even outside of a TIF district. And so there has to be an overall economic development plan, which can be amended and adopted and modified. And so, like in Grand Garner, for example, I think that's a very unique plan just to that, because it's a single site, right, allocation area. So it's different than the overall consolidated allocation area. So there always has to be a plan underneath it that sort of specifies what's the goals, what are you trying to accomplish by creating any sort of future allocation area or incentives for a project.
Is there a way that we can make something that, also economically feasible and something that should fit into the plan? Yeah,
well, I think that's why you see the commission has done the workforce housing initiative programs we have now, because it does fit in the plan.
Right.
And certainly, increasing the skills, being able to attract a workforce, well, that's tied to having attainable housing, right?
Right. It is.
And so that absolutely it is. So it's already in the plan. We already have that ability to do that.
I think that is one of the greatest things that I've heard from this interview, because it really ties together a lot of the things that the guests have been talking about, as far as this workforce housing initiative ties together the lenders, private builders, and the people who need to get that housing into these different grants that bridge that gap between them and home ownership. So I really think just to highlight that workforce housing initiative is a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
And it's a great initiative. And on that note, thank you so much, George Douglas, for coming in and talking in this 1 hour and 15-minute interview.
Well, the thing is, you edit my coughs out, it'll probably be down to an hour.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, I've been dealing with that. But no, I really appreciate, Daniel, the opportunity to be here. Certainly always willing to come on and to talk and to listen and to explain what it is that we do. And I get it, it's complicated sometimes, and it seems like it's, what we do is very much in the public, and with our public meetings, all of our meetings are live streamed and they're archived, and so you can go back and watch them, and certainly I'm always available for questions and try to explain things as simply as I can, because it is complex. I will not hide that fact, and that's not because of me. That's just the way development sometimes can be, from a process standpoint, but also from a redevelopment commission, standpoint, in terms of how a TIF and levies and stuff like that. I think the annual report, if I would say anything, is really, and we do present that. Typically, it's in our March or April, presented at the Redevelopment Commission, and then we also do it at the City Council. I think that is just one of the most informative sessions that we do, because we kind of walk through all of the activity of the Redevelopment Commission, what bond debt services that we are providing to existing bonds, what our budget is, and then where the dollars are going, sunsets of allocation areas, and stuff like that. And so those are archived, and again, the report is there, but again, it's probably an hour or so to sit through, but it's really informative.
So can you say the name of that one more time?
That's the annual report.
Okay.
And it is presented in two different places. So one is at the Redevelopment Commission, and then we also have to present that to the City Council at a public meeting, and that's typically in April and in March, I think.
Okay.
I think it's an April 15th deadline to present it to the city.
I know that my listeners will probably, they would have pushback on the phrase that everything was live streamed, because that one meeting about Concept 1 and Concept 2 was not live streamed.
Yeah, and I can maybe address that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about public meetings or live streamed, and the open house is a public meeting, but it's an open house, so it's pretty hard to live stream an open house. The idea was not a presentation. The idea was to do opening remarks and then allow people to engage directly with city staff and as well as with the consultant. And I don't think there's any open houses that I can think of most recently on projects that are live streamed. They're public meetings and stuff like that. But can you imagine? I mean, I don't know how you live stream when there's no microphone and you're just watching people go up to a thing. And I think people were certainly had an agenda there to whatever. I think, but I just want to explain it's not like it's a city council. All of our public meetings with boards and commissions are live streamed and they're archived. Open houses is where people are coming up and engaging in one-on-one, and you can't. I mean, I don't know how you live stream that with no recordings.
I don't think you can.
Yeah, I don't either.
And it turned out the way it did, and it's hard to you say open house and you don't expect that to happen. But I do also understand people's anger at what the whole history of it, and it's complicated.
It is complicated.
On that note, now that's the end of the interview.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Thank you so much. Bye.